The clinking of glasses echoed across the grand banquet hall. Laughter rolled through the air like a wave, bouncing off the high ceilings and marble columns. Round tables draped in pristine ivory linens filled the expansive space, each one meticulously arranged with fine china and crystal wine glasses that caught the light from the ornate chandelier above. The evening was supposed to be a celebration, our annual family reunion, a tradition that had lasted for over 3 decades. But in reality, it felt more like a carefully orchestrated stage where reputations were paraded and pride was auctioned to the highest bidder. I sat at my designated seat, third from the head table, in the same corner where I'd been relegated for as long as I could remember. The irony wasn't lost on me that despite being born into this family, I somehow always felt like an unwelcome guest in my own bloodline's gathering. The table was filled with cousins I barely knew, second cousins I'd never met, and distant relatives whose names I could never quite remember. They chatted animatedly about their latest business ventures, exotic vacations, and their children's Ivy League acceptances, while I picked at my salad, feeling more invisible than usual. The familiar tension in my chest tightened as I watched. My mother moved gracefully through the crowd. Eleanor Whitmore, my mother, was the undisputed queen of these gatherings. At 58, she still commanded attention like a seasoned actress who knew every camera angle. Her crimson silk dress hugged her figure perfectly, her platinum blonde hair styled in an elegant updo that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been questioned, never been made to feel less than perfect. The evening had started innocuously enough. Appetizers were served, wine was poured, and the usual small talk about weather and golf filled the air. My cousins Scott, the successful corporate lawyer, Rachel, the renowned plastic surgeon, and Marcus, the tech entrepreneur, were the evening's darlings, their achievements praised, and their latest accomplishments dissected like fine art in a gallery. I watched them bask in the admiration, remembering how I used to pretend to be proud of them, how I used to convince myself that their success somehow reflected well on me too, but I should have known it was coming. My mother never let an opportunity for a public dressing down pass by. Her voice cut through the chatter like a blade, sharp and deliberate. The familiar edge that had haunted my childhood conversations suddenly filled the room, and I felt every muscle in my body tense. I froze mid-bite, my fork trembling slightly in my hand as I recognized that tone, the one that carried the weight of decades of disappointment and carefully constructed disdain. "Attention everyone," she called out, her voice carrying across the hall with practiced precision. The conversations gradually died down, like a slow fade on a radio dial. Every eye turned toward the head table where my mother stood, glass of champagne in hand, surveying her audience like a conductor about to begin a symphony. She raised her glass, the crystal catching the chandelier light, her lips curling into that familiar, disdainful smile that I'd memorized over countless family dinners. "This year has been remarkable for our family," she began, her eyes scanning over my cousins' lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, all of them basking in her approval like sunflowers following the sun. "We have so much to celebrate. Success surrounds us, and it is proof of the strength of this family bloodline." The room hummed with agreement. Claps echoed from various tables. Nods of pride passed between family members. Murmurs of "indeed" and "absolutely" rippled through the gathering like waves on a calm sea. My stomach churned. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the way her gaze lingered a moment too long on certain faces, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she spoke about family strength. She couldn't resist the opportunity to drive home her point, to remind everyone exactly where I fit in this carefully curated family portrait, but her voice lingered like poison on the air, dragging attention toward me with the precision of a predator zeroing in on its prey. "There are exceptions," she said, the words hanging in the suddenly quiet room like dark clouds before a storm. Every eye turned my way. The weight of their collective gaze pressed down on me like a physical force. My cheeks burned hot, my throat tightening as if invisible hands were squeezing the air from my lungs. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, the familiar heat of embarrassment crawling up my neck and settling in my ears. My cousin Scott chuckled under his breath, sipping his wine as if this was routine entertainment, as if watching his aunt publicly humiliate her own daughter was nothing more than amusing. Dinner theater. The casual cruelty in his expression made my stomach lurch. Mom set her glass down with precision, the crystal meeting the table with a soft but deliberate clink. Her gaze stabbed into me like a spear, sharp and unforgiving. "Some of us," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching in mock pity, "have chosen no future. Some of us remain irrelevant." A silence dropped heavy over the room, thick and suffocating like fog rolling in from the sea. My heart slammed in my chest, pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape the cage of my body. The sound of my own heartbeat seemed impossibly loud in the quiet. She tilted her head, her voice rising just enough to make sure no one missed a single word. "She has no career, no contribution, nothing to her name." Her lips pursed, cruel amusement flashing in her eyes like lightning in a storm. "In fact," she continued, drawing out the word with theatrical deliberation, "if you wish to celebrate true accomplishments, I suggest you all ignore her." The words sliced through me like a surgeon's blade, precise and devastating. My fork clattered against the plate, the sound sharp and jarring in the silence that had settled over the room like a thick blanket. I felt their eyes on me, pity, amusement, judgment, a mixture that twisted into a sickening knot in my stomach. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to disappear into the floorboards, to become invisible, to be anywhere but here in this moment of public humiliation. The familiar urge to shrink, to make myself smaller, to somehow become less noticeable, threatened to overwhelm me. Leia, my sister, leaned back in her chair, her expression one of smug satisfaction. At 32, she had perfected the art of passive-aggressive cruelty, always managing to make her barbs seem like casual observations. "She's not wrong," she whispered loud enough for others to hear, her voice carrying the sharp edge of practiced meanness. "Some people are just background noise." Laughter rippled through the room, cruel and unrestrained. The sound felt like tiny knives piercing my skin, each chuckle a reminder of my perpetual outsider status in this family that shared my blood but never my dreams. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed. My hands balled into fists under the table, nails digging into my palms as I fought to maintain some semblance of dignity. The humiliation was crushing, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Heat crawled up my neck, burning through every nerve, making me feel like I was on fire from the inside out. I could have screamed. I could have lashed out. I could have thrown my wine glass against the wall and demanded to know why, after 30 years of existence, I was still treated like a disappointment. But I sat still, silent, my face a carefully constructed mask of composure, though my insides shook like leaves in a storm. Across the table, my cousin Rachel whispered something to her husband, though the smirk on her face betrayed her words. Even her pity felt like another form of cruelty, another reminder of how far outside their circle of acceptance I remained. My mother raised her glass once again, her movements precise and calculated, sealing my humiliation with a toast that would echo in my memory for years to come. "To success," she said, her eyes lingering on everyone but me, as if my presence somehow diluted the purity of their collective achievements. The clinking of glasses returned, louder than before, a symphony of approval that excluded me completely. I didn't raise my glass. My throat was too tight, my body trembling from holding back tears that threatened to spill over and expose the depth of my hurt. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the shame, beneath the sting of her words, something hardened. A small ember of defiance sparked in the darkness of my humiliation, growing stronger with each passing second. I sat there quietly, watching their smug smiles, their careless laughter, their celebration at my expense, and in that silence, in that moment of complete and utter degradation, I made a promise to myself that would change everything. Tomorrow will not look like today. They didn't know who I really was. They didn't know the man waiting for me outside that hall, the one who saw me for who I truly was, not for who they wanted me to be. They didn't know the truth I had carried silently, protecting it like a flame cup carefully in my hands, afraid that if I let it out, they would try to extinguish it. And tomorrow, when the Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of them, every single one of them would stand, not out of respect, not out of love, but out of the shock of realizing they had been wrong about me for so very long. I excused myself from the table with as much grace as I could muster, my movements careful and controlled despite the storm raging inside me. The humiliation still echoed in my ears, my mother's words, my family's laughter, the sound of my own heart breaking in a room full of people who should have loved me unconditionally. Every step to the parking lot felt heavy, like walking through water, each movement requiring more effort than it should. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, helping to clear some of the fog from my mind. But then I saw him. Ethan was leaning against his SUV, waiting for me like he always did. Calm, steady, safe. The second his eyes met mine, he knew. Without a word, he opened his arms and I let myself sink into him, finally allowing the tears I'd been holding back to flow freely. She did it again. I whispered into his shoulder, my voice muffled by the expensive fabric of his suit. Ethan's jaw tightened, the muscle working as he fought to control his own anger on my behalf. You don't deserve that, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm tired of being their target, I said, pulling back to look at him, my eyes probably red and swollen from crying. I'm done staying quiet. He studied me for a moment, his dark eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt or hesitation. When he found none, he nodded slowly. So tomorrow we stop being quiet. I hesitated, the weight of what I was about to do settling on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. Tomorrow's brunch will be worse. She's inviting people who matter to her, the ones she wants to impress the most. Ethan's voice was steady, almost protective, the way it always was when he was trying to shield me from the world's cruelties. Then let's show them who you are. If it takes pulling up in a Rolls to make them listen, then that's what we'll do. A fire sparked inside me, not revenge, not pride, but something purer, something stronger. The need to stand tall for once in front of the people who had spent years cutting me down, to show them that their words had not broken me, that their cruelty had not defined me. All right, I said softly, my voice stronger now. Tomorrow we go true. The morning of the brunch arrived colder than I expected. A sharp wind pressed against the windows, carrying the kind of gray sky that promised an unsettled day. Rain threatened in the distance, dark clouds gathering like an army preparing for battle. I stood in front of the mirror, palms pressed against the dresser, staring at my reflection with eyes that had seen too much pain for someone my age. My face looked calm, but my stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and terror. Today wasn't about outfits or appearances. It was about showing up as someone they could no longer erase, no longer dismiss as the family disappointment. Today was about taking back the narrative that had been written about me for far too long. Still, I chose carefully. A navy dress that hugged my frame without screaming for attention, its simple elegance speaking to a confidence I was still learning to feel. A camel coat draped across my shoulders, practical yet stylish, and black heels that gave me height without stealing comfort, because today, I needed to be steady on my feet, both literally and figuratively. Ethan arrived right on time, as he always did. The knock on the door was firm, steady, just like him, reliable, consistent, a constant in a world that had always felt unpredictable. When I opened it, he was there in a tailored charcoal suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression serious but softening when his eyes met mine. In his hand, he held a travel mug, steam rising from the lid in gentle spirals. Oat milk, 2 sugars, he said, pressing it into my hands with a small smile. My lips tugged into a faint smile of their own. You remembered? I always do. The simple statement carried more weight than it should have, a reminder that while my family forgot me, he never had. For a moment, we just stood there, letting silence breathe between us. Then he asked, "Ready?" I exhaled slowly, gathering my courage like armor around my shoulders. As ready as I'll ever be. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, like the universe was stretching time just to test me, to see if I would break under the pressure of what I was about to do. By the time the doors opened to the lobby, my heartbeat was thundering in my ears, a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. Outside, parked at the curb, the Rolls-Royce shimmered under the dull skylight, a secret the world hadn't earned yet. It didn't scream wealth in the way that flashy sports cars or ostentatious displays of money did. Instead, it radiated presence, an understated elegance that spoke to success earned rather than inherited. Neighbors stopped mid-stride, some pretending not to stare, others openly gawking at the sight of such luxury parked casually on their quiet street. I slipped into the back seat, the leather hugging me in quiet reassurance, as if the car itself understood the weight of the moment. When Ethan started the engine, the hum was low and steady, like a heartbeat too calm to be nervous. The sound should have been comforting, but instead it only heightened my awareness of what was about to happen. The drive felt surreal. Buildings blurred past, street lights flickered in the gathering dusk, and my phone buzzed endlessly in my purse with Notifications I refused to check. I already knew what the messages said, warnings from well-meaning friends who had heard whispers about the brunch, mockery from family members who thought they were being clever, reminders to stay in my place from people who had never understood that I had already found my place. I powered the phone off and pushed it aside, focusing instead on the road ahead and the man driving me toward a confrontation that had been years in the making. "You don't need them to define you," Ethan said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his voice steady and sure. "I know," I murmured, but my voice carried a weight of determination that hadn't been there before. "But I need to stop letting them silence me." When we turned onto Maple Ridge, my breath caught in my throat. The reunion house loomed ahead, a sprawling stone monument to appearances that had dominated this street for decades. The driveway was packed with cars, SUVs lined up like trophies, sedans polished to impress, even a couple of shiny imports parked right up front in the spaces reserved for the most important guests. But when we pulled in, the purr of the Rolls made heads turn instantly. From the wide bay windows, faces appeared, pressing closer to the glass like moths drawn to a flame. A ripple spread across the room like someone had dropped a stone into a still pond, disturbing the carefully maintained surface of their afternoon gathering. I opened the door slowly, the wind tugging at my coat, my heels clicking against the pavement with each step echoing louder than it should have. The sound seemed to reverberate through the quiet afternoon, announcing my arrival in a way that no invitation ever could. Ethan rounded the car and joined me, keeping a respectful half-step behind, his presence like a shield that I no longer needed but appreciated nonetheless. His quiet strength had always been my anchor, the steady force that kept me grounded when the world tried to shake me loose. Through the window, I saw them. My mother froze in mid-conversation, her carefully maintained smile faltering as she processed the sight of her daughter arriving in a car that cost more than most people's houses. My sister Leia's glass tilted in her hand as she gawked, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to something that looked remarkably like fear. Aunts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Uncles whispered to their spouses. Cousins who had barely acknowledged my existence suddenly found themselves unable to look away, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I wasn't here to beg for a seat at their table. I wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. I was here to take back the voice they'd tried so hard to strip away, to show them that the girl they had spent decades trying to diminish had grown into a woman they could no longer ignore. I turned to Ethan, my voice low but steady. "No rescuing me," I said, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. He gave me the faintest smile in return. I wouldn't dare. Together, we walked toward the front steps, and inside, my entire family waited, about to learn a truth that would silence the room in a way no toast ever could.